In a court ruling U.S. versus Fishbein, a man subjected to potential incineration while wearing another man's suit is entitled to $10,000 worth of airline tickets. It's an obscure ruling, but a very important one. To Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond.
Want to learn from those that are taking their lives, their businesses, and their passions to the next level? Best-selling author of Master the Art of Connecting and professional speaker Lou Diamond is here to connect you to some of the most inspiring and amazing people on the planet. Get ready to thrive loud with Lou Diamond.
Welcome, everyone, to a spectacular episode of Thrive Loud with Lou Diamond, connecting you to the most inspiring and amazing people that are thriving each and every day. I'm your host, Lou Diamond. Today on Thrive Loud, we have a highly sought-out speaker, best-selling author, podcast host, and the founder and CEO of Employee Fanatix, a leading employee engagement and consulting firm. She is a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategist and the world's leading expert on listening at work. She is committed to inspiring leaders everywhere to flex their empathy muscles and master the art of active listening to ensure every employee feels valued, heard, and supported. Thrive Loud listeners, listen up, because we've got Heather R. Younger in the house. Heather, welcome to Thrive Loud.
Woohoo! That was the I'm full on energized now. Thank you. Thank you for the intro.
I had the honor, privilege, and truly the most cool, fun thing that I get to do is not only do I get to connect with people who are amazing like Heather, and all our listeners know we have some unbelievable guests that come in this program, but I got an opportunity to actually hear her do her thing, as we just did an event recently where she was the featured speaker, and I got to introduce her, which was always fun. So here I got to introduce you twice, Heather, in 2 weeks.
I know. Very cool.
Heather, I want to bring our listeners up to speed because you have an interesting story, an interesting background. I kind of want to lead up. I don't want to go all the way to the womb, although maybe we will. I want to get to the point where this thing that you're doing now, this focus on listening at work, has become your gig, how that all led to be. Let's do that. Cool.
Yes, actually, so interestingly enough, I started doing this listening thing on the customer side. So I was hired in, I'd been in large account management and sales. Oh my gosh, lawyer first, large account management and sales. And then I ended up going into customer experience. And it was the first time I went to the organization. I'm like, why aren't you listening to your customers? Like, what's happening? Let's start doing some surveys and roundtables. And so we started to do that on the customer side. And I really fell in love with being like this voice of the people, like the voice of the stakeholder. And so I'd done that. And then at some point I moved over to another organization, still on the customer experience side, but there was a merger going on. And during the merger, no one was listening to the customers. No one was listening to the employees. And people kept coming to me going, what is happening? No, I don't trust anybody. Like, why is that person's title the same as my title? And I was in the middle of it because people had already been coming to me kind of as a cultural ambassador, coming to me as a trusted source. And I thought, okay, there's something to this. Why aren't people listening? And so I went to the head of HR. I said, listen, we need to do something about our culture. We have to do something about what's happening with engagement. And she said, you're right. You should go do something about that. And I was like, I'm leading customer experience. I'm not in HR, but okay, I'll do it, because I did listen really astutely. And I was uplifting people in the culture. And so it made sense. I created an employee engagement council and bringing all these people from all the different companies around the table to say, what can we do? The ones interested in making it better for everybody. What can we do to bring people together so that they know, so they know we can break down the walls of mistrust and really feel like they're connected. And so it was in that moment of creating a council with all the people around the table and listening and going to connect people where I realized two things: that there's a lot of power in gathering a lot of diverse people around a table to try to get to the bottom of a situation and to be just listening. And then the other thing is that the other lesson for me was that the leaders, through change, mergers or whatever it might be, or reorgs, they often aren't really listening to the people who drive the business forward, who actually can make that change be successful. So in that time, I was like, you know what, this is the thing. So I created Employee Fanatix. It was actually Customer Fanatix at that time. And it was really about kind of creating engagement on both customer and employee side. And it evolved over time after, again, I then switched over to start doing more employee engagement surveys, DEI surveys, reviewing all of the comments. I've read like 30,000 of my own comments myself. And then I facilitate over 100 employee focus groups and culture team meetings. And so sitting in all of that, and of course, listening to the customers early on, I just had a lot of listening and realized the power of it, how much we can get to the bottom of things if we just paused and asked the right questions and let them talk.
So I want to ask this question, and this requires a little further rewind. Have you always been a good listener?
I'm not always a good listener as of today.
Oh.
I'm not
let's go to that.
perfect.
Right.
I'm not perfect at it. I mean, the thing is that every expert you go find, you'll find them on another day where they're not great at the thing they're talking about. I would be really a hypocrite if I told you every single time I listen well, particularly at home. I'm really good at work. So listening at work, I'm an expert at, and I'm pretty dang good at it at work. At home, I'm not so great. I have 4 kids and I'm running, as you can see, I have a lot of energy. I'm running them like so fast, right? And they're like, Mom, did you hear me? And so I have to go, okay, put the lid down, clear everything away. Okay, can you say that again? So I can I want to take it in now. Tell me what's happening. I want to hear it. Please, please, please. I want to hear you. So I find myself doing that, obviously more at home than I do at work, but I'm not perfect. Wish I could say I was.
Heather, in that moment when you recognized that you were given the responsibility to focus on this listening, and that you saw that you were able to come up with a game plan to get people to really tap in and do that, personally, was like you said, this is it. This is the thing. And you also mentioned that you had this blend of, there was some diversity components that needed to be brought together with this. And obviously listening to all those related aspects, maybe help the listeners understand a little bit, maybe why you are the right person to be the one to be the messenger and the person to help people do this better. Have you ever thought about it? Because I've looked at some of your bio and some of your background. I'm like, she's like literally was geared up to be the specific person for this. So can maybe dig a little bit deeper and share that with our listeners.
Yes. Okay. So quickly, because it's kind of, I guess, coming from the womb, right? I'm the only child of a white Jewish mother and a Black Christian father. And my mom's parents weren't at all happy about the union. And so they pretty much kept my father and I out of any public gatherings. No one would ever know we were there. My pictures didn't hang on their walls like my white cousins did. So I was really an outsider, and they would do all these things. Like, for example, my mom went to my grandfather's funeral and I was never invited. No one asked me my opinion. No one asked me if I wanted to go. In fact, I was explicitly excluded. You're not coming. In that case, and those types of things that happened through my life, in that relationship, I realized, well, why is no one's asking me? And the power of asking someone, the power of including someone's voice, but how painful the pain of exclusion, not just from the family that way, but the pain of the exclusion of my own voice. I wasn't even a person in that, right? And so I felt like personhood is really created in the voices that we use. If you think about us in that crib and how we're like cooing, and our parents come to our crib side and we're like, oh, okay, like someone heard me, like, oh, I'm important to these people that are these big people, right? Well, that's exactly what's happening at work or to our customers. They're wanting us, they want to use their voices for feedback, and they want people who they look to as the big people to be the ones responding. And so I knew through that whole journey that pain of that exclusion, someone had to fill the gap, and it did become just a natural path for me to take, to be that voice for people.
I never thought about it until I heard you speak, and it was something that resonated with me. And I want to get your take on this. And that is, I never thought that a culture of not listening is exclusion, that listening is inclusion. Because when we are listening and taking in, it doesn't matter. This isn't a matter of a gender, race, or anything about that exclusion or whatever it is. It's literally taking another human being and including them into the formula, into the conversation. So listening is actually the root of inclusion. Do you agree with this?
I do agree with it, which is why, interestingly enough, so before everything happened with George Floyd, I mean, there's so many things that have happened historically, years and years and decades ago, but this George Floyd incident, and it really did bring everything to the forefront. And I was thrust right in it in the pandemic. And people were like, well, number one, I look like I do. So they're immediately thinking, well, she must know about this. And then they also know the space that I work in it wasn't diversity and inclusion as much. It was on inclusion of voices. So it was all about listening. I've been in the listening space for a while. So when they came to me, like, what do you think? And what can you come and like talk to our employees? Can you get to the truth of what our employees want? Because they're not really talking to us. And I said, of course I can, because this is what we do. Because through listening is the portal to be able to get all of the other feelings, all the other things to happen. But you're right. We obviously the backdrop, if we're looking at it from the racial side, the gender side, all those things, that's there. But I'm talking inclusion that's much more broad. And I say this in all of my training on diversity and belonging. It's when we create that sense of belonging, it's how many more people can we bring on the dance floor with us? How many more people can we put around the table with us as we're making important decisions that impact their lives, by the way? Because what's happening is team members, customers, they feel like things are happening to them, right? Not with them, to them.
So now I wanted to get something, because you and I had the good fortune of being at the same conference, a different conference, getting to hear some incredible leaders. And we got AJ and Rory Vaden came up, and they were trying to describe to everyone in the audience to pick the one word, the problem you solve in one word. And I was curious because you help solve a lot of problems through it. I had trouble coming up with one word for you. Did you remember this exercise, one? And two, did you come up with that one word of the problem you solve?
Yeah. Yes, I remember the exercise, and it was so hard because I had already created like a whole new brand image and all of these things. And I'm like, let's see. And then I went and talked to one of my top customers who had been we've been working together for 4 years. And she said, a lack of clarity. So it was a lack of clarity. So what we solve is a lack of clarity, because what happens is when they come to us, they're like, I don't really know like what our team members, what like we think we do, but we're making assumptions about it. And what we do through the listening process is help create more clarity for them so they can then know what to do next steps.
Yeah, by the way, you weren't the only person in the room that went, shit, I just rebranded my whole thing and now I got to redo it again. For your own education, mine was I'm solving the problem of selfishness and helping to connect people to better together because they're being too much of themselves and not coming together. Something similar between the two.
Love it.
Okay, so listeners, especially, and I'm using that word intentionally here, the listeners are listening right now and they're thinking about their own organization or they're thinking about themselves. And what I actually think they're really thinking about is, where is the biggest listening problem? What is the thing that people are not listening to the most today? And what are you seeing the most in your work where the lack of listening is existing?
I think there are two big holes. The first is probably more obvious to most, which is we are listening to respond. So we aren't slowing it down enough to remove all of our filters, all of our barriers to listening, all of the things that are outside in the world that are stopping us from pausing. So that's like the cell phone, the computer screen, the kids, like all those things. So that's kind of like probably an obvious thing to most. But the second thing is that when people tell us something, they usually, in most cases, not all cases, are expecting something to be done about it. And they want to know something was done about it. And so where most people are dropping the ball is they're not either not acting on what they've heard and or they're not coming back to you to tell you they did something about what they heard. Yeah. So those are kind of the two biggest areas are lack of action and a lack of really closing the loop with them to say, here's what we heard you and here's what we've done about what you said. And so thank you so much for your voice. Because remember, I told you it's the power in the voice. The inclusion is in using the voice. It's in the listening to more people.
I loved how you said earlier that, you're still working on being a good listener. And you made an interesting point that during work, when you're on in your day, your switch is on and you're listening and you're active in that, which means that it requires this bit of energy and focus. I love asking guests this question, and I'm just curious where this goes. Aside from a very large water bottle, which you just shared with me right now, how do you maintain the energy and also help coach others to do the same so that they can keep their active listening on? Because I do agree with you. I get home and maybe I've been listening all day long. I don't want to listen to anything. I just want to turn it off. Like I just need to unwind and do it down. What can they do intraday to help them be better active listeners?
Well, I would say, this is like a really brilliant question. Most times we aren't filling ourselves up first. And we can't go like be fully present for those who are looking to us for guidance or leadership in any way if we don't fill ourselves up. And I mean, really first at the beginning of the day. And I mean, with good stuff. So it could be spiritual reading. It could be whatever, any kind of reading. It could be working out, which I do, 6 days a week. It could be eating well, this big old thing, a gallon of water, drinking well, right? So literally filling all the ways we can ourselves up, which then does give us the energy. I would say this too, that if you're not someone who cares about people, and you know it, like in your gut, you're like, well, I like them, they're okay, like whatever. But if I could just get the job done, I don't really care. Then don't be in a role that requires you to be with people and to meet their needs deeply. Because if you aren't that person, it's not going to come over naturally. And I can't teach you all day, no matter what. I don't care how many skills I have. I can't teach you to care. So if you care first, that's going to be the requirement. Then fill yourself up secondly. Then your energy is going to naturally come because your deep desire to care is going to make you stay really focused on the person in the moment. That's what I would say. And that's what I do.
Yeah. I want you to share this with the listeners because I thought you had so many brilliant things to say when you spoke and you connected with people, but there was one thing that really resonated the most with me. Can you share with the listeners of Thrive Loud how important it is to understand the unsaid, to talk about the things that aren't being said at a certain time when you're as part of the listening process? It actually was one of the first steps that you have there. Maybe kind of like tease into that, because I thought it was brilliant. And I also think it is the thing that was least done out of all the steps that you have towards active listening. And I thought your take on this was great. I'll give you the stage. Yeah.
So this recognize the unsaid idea is really about understanding that people aren't safe to speak their truth. And that's not just like the racial topic. Again, that is many employees at work are not safe to speak their truth. And I know that because I've read all of those thousands of surveys and sat in focus groups, right? So that's why I know it. And so since if you go into that as understanding that people aren't safe to speak their truth, now you're going to be paying attention to the signs of discontent that are unspoken. So you're paying attention to the cues and the signs and the signals that are, by the way, there. But you have to pause. You have to be more emotionally self-aware, but also organizationally aware to know that, because you can't even get to like seeking to understand or that really true active listening process until you have that awareness there, till you are recognizing what people are not saying. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot.
So that's actually I wanted to tap into this. We don't have to go too deep, but it is a key topic, and it's dancing around a lot of the topics of listening, specifically around the diversity inclusion issues that everyone is seeing and being awoken up to, for the lack of a term here. Mm-hmm. And that is, there's a bunch of people that are afraid to say things now because they're afraid to say something that might offend. They say the wrong thing. And this isn't just a race issue. This could be a gender related issue, a sexual orientation related issue, even just being an offending issue, because there's so much sensitivity in today's world that listening, there's so much, to your point, there's so much more unsaid. How do we approach these things so that we can have the right conversation and other people can be open to saying those things versus putting it in that bucket of the unsaid?
The one thing that is kind of foundational to listening is trust. And you would get less unsaid if trust was higher. Yeah. And so what are the ways, thinking about, are you trustworthy, you individually or your organization? Is it trustworthy above organization? And what are the things that you need to do to build that trust? So I would say, thinking about doing what it is you say you're going to do is a big one. Making sure you're in someone's corner, even if they make a mistake. Making sure that you spend time with them so you know who they are and you can speak directly to them. There are a lot of trust building tools that we can do, but you have to know that in order to have less unsaid, you have to have more trust.
Yeah. Well,
and I think the idea of having that awareness that there's so much more unsaid there. And in the diversity, equity, inclusion space, it is the crux of it, because if there is no trust there, no matter what you're saying. So here's an example. I was talking about all those surveys, and I do DEI surveys. My analysts, we look at all those comments, and what I'll see sometimes, they'll say, well, this organization is moving towards having more inclusion and all these things. But there is a faction of maybe 20 to 30% of your employees who don't feel comfortable having this conversation, not for the reasons you think. They may be mostly white males. They might be female, white. It doesn't really, but they might be like, I don't like this idea. Or they might be people who are not the kind of the sexual orientation conversation makes them super uncomfortable. And what I say to them is this: inclusion is inclusion for everyone.
Right.
Listening means we listen to everyone. So just because you're on your horse saying, we're like in this new inclusion workplace, and we're going to be like so open as a workplace, keep in mind, you will have a faction, I don't know what percentage is, that is not on board. And how your thing is then if we want to be inclusive to all, how do we get more on board, even those who are uncomfortable having that conversation? So what happens often is people are around a table and the leaders will come to me and be like, well, we had this round table and no one spoke. Like, no one said anything. It's like, okay, well, I can tell you what the missing thing, the reason why I didn't speak is why?
Trust.
Exactly. A lack of trust. So let's talk about how you build trust, because that's really where we need to go to. Stop worrying about who did speak and let's start figuring out how you're going to build trust. That's how you get to the point where people talk more, less unsaid. And now you can start to really seek to understand what the truth is.
Love it. I love asking guests this question, and I'm very curious to see where this one goes. Look, you are thriving. You're speaking everywhere. You're helping people become better listeners. You're connecting your message across a huge, wide audience all over the place. And you're hosting your own podcast show on top of all of that. And by the way, that means you're thriving each and every day. So we all, though, have days, though, where we're not quite kicking on all cylinders and we're not thriving. Heather Younger, when you have trouble thriving, what practice do you seek, or maybe which individual do you seek out to get yourself back on the thriving track?
I would say downtime. So the self-care is a thing I lean into, which might mean full-on downtime. It might be no social media. I may literally not even get up and get myself really ready that day. That usually happens for me, by the way, if I've done a big round of travel. And if it's been a lot of like delays, and I've been given a lot of myself. So if there's a big round of travel, I will like give myself the first half of the next day to just start very slowly. Yeah. And I may not even schedule any appointment. So I know that about myself. I know what I need to do in order to refill myself back up, and I seek those things out. I would say my children too. I have 4 children. Yeah, I sure do. We mentioned that, did we?
I was getting there.
Yeah. And they're 2 teen boys, a teen daughter, and 1 tween boy. And so the 3 boys are still home. And so what'll happen is I love to come home to them and just cuddle. And like I said, it's no, what is it? No airs, doesn't matter what I look like, right? I just go to them. That they are an energy source for me.
That's 4 in a tight zone there, by the way. Wow. It's a lot. You're in the activity zone, the all zone. And I totally can imagine what that's like. Let's do the admin part of the show before we get to Fun Street. Heather, share with the listeners all the places people can learn about you, websites, URLs, social handles. We'll put it in the show notes, but it always gets more engagement when they hear it from you.
I would say heatheryounger.com is probably the best place to go, because it encapsulates everything else. And if you go there too, there's actually a free listening guide that you can download. Right at the bottom of the page, you go in there, just put your name and email in, and you can always unsubscribe if you don't want to hear from me ever again. Hopefully you do. But when you go in there, it's a beautiful guide that gives you a lot of different steps to look at for listening. And then you can go to LinkedIn. LinkedIn's another place I'm pretty active. You just look up Heather Younger. I think that's all you have to put in, and it'll pop me right up. Those would probably be the 2 places I would send people to.
Super. Heather, are you ready to go down Fun Street with me, even though we've been having fun since the very beginning?
Yes.
All right. Can you share with the listeners what you shared with me was one of your all-time favorite movies?
An Affair to Remember.
Okay. Now, I want to ask this question because I believe there are 2 of these movies, right? There's an old one, and then there's like a relatively newer one, like in the 90s or something like that. Which one is the one that you love the most?
The old one.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's Grant, and Carr is the actress and actor. Yep. And that's my favorite. My mom, when I was younger, my mom and dad would always, we either watch Westerns, or I'd watch like the black and whites with the Technicolor. And so I don't get to watch it a lot at home because of my family, like it basically takes every TV up. But occasionally I like to be able to watch movies like that. I love it. I love the traditional nature. I love the love that seems like more pure. I just love it all. Yeah.
And I was going to ask this question because my first connection to that movie was not that movie, but was Sleepless in Seattle, because they poke fun a little bit of that movie and the whole romantic thing that takes place. I was going to ask you, when did that movie first connect with you? What was that? Was it as a young kid, or your parents were watching it, or something of that nature?
Mm-hmm. It was probably like early teens or something. Like I said, I grew up, that father and I, when we couldn't go to different events or whatever, I just spent a lot of time with him, and we'd watch Westerns and the black and whites or the Technicolor. Yeah. I just grew up with that. So it's a huge part of who I am.
Awesome. All right. Now we're going to do the speed round of Fun Street. And I know you can handle this because you got game. I am going to ask you a few questions. Each of them are things that lift you up, make you feel good, motivate you. Basically, they make you thrive. And there are no wrong answers because they're your answers. So our listeners are going to be listening because they want to understand and connect with you as to what makes you thrive. So you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Of late, a song that you listen to, or maybe one that pumps you up.
Of late. Oh, there's a song called "You Make Me Brave." It's a Christian song, but it is I love that song. It's called "You Make Me Brave." All
right. Awesome. A favorite food that is not a dessert.
Chicken wings.
Hold on. I'm going to dive down here. Are we talking like sweet or spicy? How do you like it?
I actually prefer them like really crispy and sauce on the side.
Oh, okay. Very cool. A favorite dessert.
That would be chocolate chip cookies, warm out of the oven.
Ooh, I like that. You like the big chocolate chips or the big cookie? Like, which is more important to you? Either one, I guess.
Just warm and gooey. That's it.
Warm and gooey. An activity you wish you did more of?
Probably more walks in the middle of the day.
Uh-huh. An activity you wish you did less of?
Eating desserts.
All those chocolate chip cookies. I do know that actually is one of your things. That's one of the things that I remember introduced you to the stage, is that she loves the warm chocolate chip cookies. Heather Younger, if I snap my fingers and you could be anywhere in the world, where are you?
Paris, France, or even the French countryside. That'd probably be where I'd be right now. Yeah.
Heather Younger. Hey, everyone, listen up, check her out. Heather R. Younger is it. And if you want to have her at your event, you got to, because she does an unbelievable job at really the most important thing I think that we all need to do to connect these days. And that's listen. Thank you so much for coming on Thrive Loud and listening to me to come on the program. I said, you got to be on. And here she is. Thank you for coming
Thanks,
on.
Thanks, Lou. Thank you.
You got it. And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. And until next time, keep moving onward and upward. And remember, be brief, be bright, be gone.
You've been listening to Thrive Loud with your host, Lou Diamond. Check us out on the web at thriveloud.com and follow us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook at Thrive Loud. And check us out on the Good Pods app at Thrive Loud, where you can follow, listen, and connect directly to Lou and all of the Thrive Loud episodes. Thanks for listening.